Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the UV Effect podcast. Thank you so much for joining me once again, and I'm excited to get into this episode. I once again have another family member. I kind of spread them out a bit. I think this is the last family member that I've done. Oh, no, of my immediate family that I've done. And this is my father. Woo, my dad. My dad is wonderful. I love him very much. He's a wonderful father. He's a very wise and subdued man. I mean, he's worked in media and entertainment for most of his life, or I think, no, not most of it, for a good portion of his life. It's always been a passion of his, and he used to be an actor, but now he works more so in production for people's projects, and yeah, I mean, he's a storyteller. He's always said it. He really is. And, I feel like that's kind of the way he always helped me and my brother when we were growing up. He always had like an anecdote or a story or a poem or a quote, something that would explain to us something that, that would help us in whatever situation or problem that we were in. And so I'm really excited to share this case study with you because I feel like this is a story in of itself. But yeah, I don't want to talk too much more. Let's just get into the episode, let you hear how this goes for yourself and seeing this interesting dynamic that this means, like what it means for him, in his life. But yeah, let's just go in. But first, make sure to like and subscribe and share. And yeah, let's do this. Okay. So step one, identify. How would you describe yourself in 6 words? 3 being positive and 3 being negative observations. So let's start here at the beginning. This first question I use generally to gauge the individual, how they see themselves. But my dad is not a particularly self-aware individual, which is incredibly important for this process. He's been working on it for some time now, but I definitely had to push him quite a lot. And to get these words, it took quite a bit of time, but we were able to narrow down his positives were confident, explorative, and a team player. And his negatives were aloof, sensitive, and not self-aware. When we were trying to figure out the word sensitive, I brought up this other word as a potential, and he shared with me this really, really good moment. Would you say that you are at all self-conscious?
No.
Okay.
No. That was taken away from me as a kid. So, you get called white boy every day, and you ain't white. Eventually, it's just white noise to you, which is wonderful, and that's when I learned the power of overcoming perception.
My dad, he grew up in Southeast DC, and to keep that very simple, it was not a great place to grow up. He was a light-skinned boy, and that was a struggle as well. Again, keeping it simple. That's a whole story to share. But he was smart, and he still is. He was smart, and he was raised by a wonderful single mother that taught him important values. And so he was able to make something out of himself that most people didn't even see. And he was able to come out of where he was despite of his beginnings. And that has always been very inspiring to me and has inspired me to be stronger and to fight even with my little suburbia lifestyle. It has been very inspiring for me to see that. But, that also what he just shared about, having to learning how to fight other people's perceptions, I feel like that also lends to kind of his mindset and the struggle that he tends to have with people, which is something that we're going to be getting into. So let's just keep it going. The next question is, how would you describe your relationship with your profession?
My relationship to my profession is one of an understanding that if I am doing what I desire, then we're all good. If I am not, then we have a dissonance, and there's a problem.
Are you doing that in your profession? Are you doing what you desire in your profession?
Yeah. And that's the push. It starts in my mind first, and then I'm able to make it manifest. And so it wasn't always that way. It was more of, well, I was doing stuff just to survive, but the latter part of last year and present, the shift is now in an understanding that I know where I'm headed towards because I'm determining that outcome. And my choice is to work toward my desired outcome, even though I'm still doing many of the same things, although there have been variables that have changed, as opposed to I'm doing this to acquire $1 or pay a bill or just because I don't know what else to do. So those same things now look different. It's no longer a half empty, it's now half full.
I would recommend going back and listening to those few seconds again, because that was very important. You know, my dad being the provider and being a provider of the household, you know, he sacrificed a lot of his dreams and his work in order to provide for his family. And that was something that I had not recognized until I was old enough to see it, old enough to realize it. And it was wonderful, and I genuinely appreciate everything that he's done. But now that, you know, both my brother and I have gotten older, he is in a place where he is no longer allowing money to shape his life, to be the main focus of his life, to allow his passions and his desires to lead him, to get back to that place that he was before. And that's a whole other conversation that I don't have enough time to delve into right there. But what he just said was incredibly important. And what I'm going to say right now, I'm just going to leave there, is this. Money is one of those many, many ways that we allow the world to define who we are. And so my dad coming to this place where he, you know, he's not living for the dollar anymore. And it's not like we have all the money in the world. He's just made this decision. He's making this decision in his life. And that is very important. So we're going to go ahead and move on to this next moment where, you know, I'm asking him, after he listed for me some of the things that he does in his work and in his hobbies that went from directions of directing to video editing and enjoyment, things that he enjoys as hobbies, like sports and playing sports and commentating in sports, things like that. But consulting and even work in sports and things like that, that makes sense for him because he's a very task-oriented person and people are coming to him for a specific reason to fulfill a certain goal. And so, you know, that in itself too is another window. And that is embodied here in this next moment where I'm asking him this next question, and his answer really clarifies or even just brings more light to what it is I was just saying about how he best operates, task-oriented and such. What about you do you feel like lends to your ability to do that?
It's probably just the sheer enjoyment because I don't necessarily like people. But
Right,
I like that when people are together for a purpose.
What we're trying to do here in this moment is narrow down internal abilities and figure out which of these internal abilities are innate gifts. And so enjoyment, saying that, you know, the reason why, you know, what lends to your enjoyment and how good you are at doing something is the enjoyment itself, wasn't quite what we were looking for. But what he continued to say after that opened our eyes and allowed us to figure out some internal abilities, which were intentional, self-motivated, and dedicated. So yeah, that was great. And then from there, I was really interested in the hobbies that he had listed with watching sports, playing sports, sports commentary. He's really into sports. And so I was wondering, you know, why? What about him lends to that, to the why he enjoys it, why he's good at it, those aspects of it. And, you know, when he was first going into this, he was explaining that it was about the story. You know, he loved the story. Like you said before, he's a storyteller. He enjoys, you know, the rivalry and the build-up and paying attention to those little details of why, you know, they've got the rivalry and all of that. He loves that. But I wanted to push him a little bit further, and as we continued pushing and talking this out, we really experienced, or we figured out that it wasn't just about the story, but what the story could uncover for him.
The connecting piece of all of these is just to learn and apply what I've learned. I don't like to just learn for the sake of saying I have knowledge. I want to learn and then use it. So whether it's a basketball game or a documentary, I'm trying to learn and use what I've learned.
Whether it's him in his work, in film or production, or watching a football game, it's really about the study for him. And in that, I was able to recognize that one of his internal gifts was intellect. It was about searching for understanding, for knowing, for knowledge. And that is quite special.
Because you're saying that you put these parts, that you enjoyed the journey of it, you enjoyed the story of it, but you enjoyed the story not just because of, this happened and this happened and this happened, but rather why this happened and how that affected how this happened and how that then can affect me and another person, right? You pull from it.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, we were able to come up with a comprehensive list of internal abilities, which were curious, intellectual, competitive, intentional, self-motivated, dedicated, and analytical. And from that list, we were able to condense, narrow down, identify his innate gifts.
So you're curious, intellectual, deliberate, purposefully intentional,
Yes.
regimented, self-motivated, and motivated, and dedicated.
So yeah, those are his innate gifts, and they're very good. I mean, obviously they're good, but I think it's a strong list, and we actually ended up changing intentional to deliberate, which was, he had such an issue with the word deliberate, but deliberate really did encompass more so of who he was and what he did and how he moved more than intentional. But it was so funny to me how difficult it was to get to that word. Like, he was struggling because he had some pre-existing notions of the word. It was in a more negative connotation, but I was trying to explain to him that, like, the word is not negative at all. Like, it's it's just another way of saying intentional, but it has a different kind of meaning that blended more to him, but he was just struggling with it, and that was hilarious. And it has taught me that I'm going to have to be very flexible with people in terms of wording, because people have so many different attachments with words. I've dealt with that a few times already, so it's very, very interesting, very funny. But now we're going to go ahead and jump into step 2, define. Of course, like I always say, my favorite part, and get into his value. So yeah, let's jump into it.
Hello, welcome.
Oh, hi.
How you doing today?
I'm good.
Okay. What do you remember from last time?
That I didn't like the word deliberate.
All right. Well, what did you get from last time then? Maybe that's a better question.
That deliberate is a good word.
That's one stubborn man right there. I get it from him, honestly. So, starting off here in step 2, define. Of course, we're working to define what it is that makes him valuable in the world. That means his impact. And to start off, I'm going to ask him this question. We're going to the moment why I'm asking this question about if he sees himself as a valued and a valuable individual.
So the next question I want to ask is, would you consider yourself to be a valuable individual?
Yes.
Yes. And would you consider yourself to be a valued person?
Yes.
Okay. You want to say why for just both of these, just a general why?
I consider myself valuable because my intent is always to bring resolution or help and aid to whatever problem is presented as best as I can, even if it's saying nothing. I find that being deliberate and efforts to enhance people and help people the way that they need to be enhanced or helped is the best value you can bring.
It's a really good answer. I mean, I love what he said there, being deliberate in an effort to enhance others. I think it speaks a lot to who he is, and of course we'll see how that unfolds. But I also just find that that's a good practice, and to be able to see that for himself, to recognize that that's something that he does in people's lives, that he is, even going back to his, innate gifts, intellectual, deliberate in itself, regimented, dedicated, that feeds into that. It feeds into that ability to recognize people, where people are, to see what they might need, and to be able to say or do what it is that pushes an individual to level up a little bit. And I mean, that definitely classifies in what he does, and that will definitely start to become more clear as we go along. Before that becomes clear, we're going to have to do something a little bit different in this episode. So, if you don't know, which I'm sure you don't, when I record these episodes, I don't plan out a script or anything in beforehand. It's mostly reaction-based. I record as I go, and it's almost like I'm sharing my notes on what I'm experiencing with you all, right? And so as I'm listening to the recordings and, recording the podcast, there is a moment in which I noticed during the research, but I've noticed even more now, that there is a bit of cognitive dissonance happening, meaning simply that in one moment he's saying one thing, and in the next he's saying something that he believes in that directly counters, in a way, the other original statement. We'll get into how this is happening in this next series of moments, but to start it off, I'm going to begin by sharing you a moment which kind of sparked the conversation, which allowed this cognitive dissonance to become clear to me.
I feel like those are all attributes of, like, somebody who's able to, like, I don't know, see a little bit bigger, right? Or, like, just kind of, because you said that you have your tunnel vision, right? But this is when you're just focused on the thing, right? Mm-hmm. But it seems like that kind of, like, that opposite.
Yeah.
Is when you kind of, in a positive way, remove yourself from what's happening just in order to watch, right?
Yeah.
In order to explore, in order to learn, and that allows you to proceed with with what's needed, right?
Yeah.
So before we move forward, let me provide a little bit of clarity in terms of what I was talking about in the beginning. The attributes I was saying would contribute to this potential thing that he was able to do, which was being able to detach from a certain situation or something. And we'll go into that a little bit more as we go. But what I was referring to was a few different things. One of his responses to the greatest impact that he can make, that he does make, was when he's able to understand what's going on. It's through that understanding, which was something that was very important to him. It was through that understanding that he was then able to, be a listening ear, to provide advice, to even provide a sense of relief, comedy, whatever it is. It's through understanding the situation, understanding what's going on, understanding the person, that he was then able to provide an important impact, or what was necessary for them or for the situation. He's also responding to some of the things he noted as what people connect to about him, a down-to-earth, relatable nature, and not being judgmental. And so all these different things to me, and how he was describing them, how he went into detail about it, made me think that, and also knowing him as well, made me consider a potential way that he is able to do the things that he does. And I was, suggesting that maybe it was this ability to detach. And I think you might become clear why I thought that as we continue on in this conversation.
That's an interesting observation, because I'm thinking about the tunnel vision versus the wide open range. Mm-hmm. And I guess it's more, all of those things are just me. Mm-hmm. But I think if I don't have anything to focus on, then that's when I'm that other way, mm-hmm. right? But if I have something to focus on, then none of that other stuff happens.
And in that, he's referring to a comparison that we had made regarding when he makes the greatest impact and when he makes the least impact. And he was saying that in the least impact, it's when has tunnel vision. He's just overly focused on what it is that he's doing. But when he makes a greater impact, he's more able to be there for people and to make that great impact that we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm not locked in, then I'm free to be whatever I need to be to. But if I'm locked in, then everything else is out of the way, and I'm here. I'm not always focused on something every day, but when I am focused, then that's what I'm doing. When I'm not focused in, then I'm just here to help and be involved in.
And so do you find in those moments then that you tend to provide more?
Because I I'm not focused into on the one thing. Absolutely, that's where.
How would you describe that? Like that free place?
I'm not focused on anything. So I'm kind of just free spirited, free range. It's a vacation from the focus.
So let's just break down a little bit of what we just got from there. When he has tunnel vision, when he's overly focused, when he's locked in, he's unable to really make that greater impact that he said that he makes, the greatest impact that he makes. It's when he is, what he says, free-spirited, free-range. When he's there, when he's open, he's able to then make that greater impact, meaning that he's able to be open to listening and understanding what is happening with a person or a situation, to then therefore provide what is needed for them, to help them, to push them, whatever that might be. But important to note, the last thing he just said about this state of being a vacation from the focus, listening to it back, I could see that was the first sign of the disconnect between his thinking and my thinking. You'll see what I mean.
It's interesting. I find that I rarely see you that way.
Which way?
That
the free range way.
Yeah, free range way. But I genuinely I would actually say that is something that I connect with about you, because it's in those moments where I actually feel your freedom, right? Where I feel and I feel like you care more, because you're not. Because it's not like you're just locked in on the one thing that I said, or like just one thing that someone did or whatever. But it's like you care about the whole thing. Like it's not just zoning in on one thing. And there's something about it that to me it seems like you're just like you're there.
Yeah.
Just an FYI, though this is how I feel, and I find it's a good point. It was an error on my part, imparting too much of my own personal beliefs into his thought process. In research, I'm new to this, but, I'm realizing now that definitely is not the way to conduct. Just putting that out there.
Just certain days where I don't feel like locking in on anything. So, yeah, so I'm like, I can help, I can be observant, I can be available. So that's what this is, like a day like today. But tomorrow would not be that, because there's stuff that has to be done. So it would go into that place of I'm with the tasks, not with everything else.
Would you want to be more the other way? This other way?
No.
And you're fine with being more so?
I like the balance of it all. It gives me flexibility, and it gives me an understanding of how things work best for me.
But is there a balance in it currently? That's what I'll ask.
I have usually Sundays, it's like the one day out of the week where I just like free to do whatever.
Would you consider that a balance?
It kind of is for me, because it's like a whole 24 hours versus parts of the other. And it's really, it's not like the whole of the other 6 days or 5 days, because Sabbath I'm not doing anything either, except that's trying to stay focused and dedicated on time with God. So the other 5 days of the week, which are typically just supposedly work days, I'm still carving out time to do stuff with family after work. But I like being able to focus in on work.
Okay, so this is where things start to become a bit interesting, right? No, we figured out, right? We figured out that when he's able to make that great impact, when he's able to understand what's going on, when he's able to provide what people need in terms of that, ear or advice or whatever, it's when he's in that more open and available space. That's when he's able to do that, or at least able to make that greater impact more. And so I tell him, well, I don't really see you like that very often. Do you want to be in that place more? And he says no. Now, his reasoning for that as he continues on, it makes sense. Not necessarily because I agree with it, but it makes sense as to how it allows him to operate and how he is comfortable with operating. But what I'm recognizing here is that it allows him to function and operate for himself, well for himself, but not so much for others.
Right, and I mean, the focus is obviously a part of something that you offer, or at least what allows you to do well for you, and personally. But this section is all about what you do for others.
Yeah.
Right? And
yeah, well, again, I'm not a big fan of people too much, so if I have a day where people are free to do whatever and I can be engaged with people, then that's enough for me. Because all the other days, I feel like God gave us one day to rest. So I'm like, all right, well, I just one day to dedicate to not working with anyone, just doing what people want. And then I can do the other stuff because that's the stuff that keeps me sharper and better.
Okay, so in this response, I remember during the research, I was thinking to myself, okay, so he's not that interested really in making, that distinct impact. He's not really interested in making that. I mean, he is interested in it when it can happen, the one day of the week where he'll allow himself to be open. But, he'd prefer, it seemed to me, that he would prefer to, just do what, he needs to do, his work, stay focused. And when, an opportunity for, that the one day in the week where he can allow himself to be open, that's when he'll make his impact. So it's not like he's pursuing, an opportunity to provide this impact in people's lives. So I asked him this.
So I should have asked this beforehand, but do you have an interest in making a positive impact in people's lives? Like a substantial positive impact in people's lives?
Yeah, I prefer indirectly, but...
Indirectly?
Yeah.
Okay.
I live by the notion that more people will know of me than will ever meet me.
And no. That's not to say that you have to do it personally, but it's a very, just a simple question in terms of just, would you like the things that you do? Like, are you striving, are you striving that the things that you do are, more than anything, is having a positive impact in people's lives?
Yeah. Because the opposite is no good. I don't want to be negative. So, yeah.
Well, yeah. But, yeah. You're either part of the problem or part of the solution.
I asked him the wrong question there. I asked him, are you interested in making a positive impact? And I realized I should have asked, are you interested in making a distinct impact? Your distinct impact. Because I think that is the purpose of this, right? It's unique. It's design, right? What you are purposed to do. And so in his response, responding with, positive, because negative would be no good. Me coming back and saying, well, yeah, because you're either part of the problem or part of the solution, I think was me hinting, it definitely actually was, me hinting towards the consensus of even that statement. That idea that you're either part of the problem or part of the solution means that there's no in between. You are either contributing to the solution or you're part of the problem. Now, this is not to say that him just focusing on, on his focus and what he does for himself and his work is making him a part of the problem in some problem in some way. But what I think I was saying with that statement was that when it comes to your distinct impact, not just a positive or negative impact, but your design, your distinct, your unique impact, you're either making it or you're not. And the whole purpose of this process is to make it on purpose.
But I think that, like, in your response to some of these things, you seem to be more, like, attracted to or holding on to the parts of you that, allows you to function for yourself, right? Mm-hmm. You're focused on the thing at hand, and you're doing what you got to do, whatever, and then you have the one day you pull aside in order to kind of be a little bit more free reign, right?
Okay.
But if the free nature that you when you allow yourself to be a little less, like, tied down, is what allows you to then make a bit more of an impact on people. Not to say, because this is, okay, because I don't want is to say that, like, your focused and sturdy nature is wrong, because it's definitely not. It's a part of what allows you to do important work, help people, serve people through your work, through your medium, right?
Yeah.
But I think there needs to be, because you're saying balance, right? The word was balance. And I think that there might be some more to strive for in terms of that balance, right? Because when you're overly focused, when you're overly, stern, and just, you're only this way, you're only doing this one thing, it doesn't seem to have the same impact as when you allow yourself to kind of be more open and more kind of free, right? But if you were just always a free, floating, flower or whatever, you probably would not be making the same impact that you are making now in terms of being able to be, I guess, solid for people, and in order to kind of even be confident with your own self and sticking to your own gun. So basically, I'm going through all of this to say that I find that there needs to be maybe just, like, analyzing a bit more in that balance of where you make the most impact in that in-between spot between the focus and the freedom.
This dissection of the balance is very important because, like I was saying, and I want to make that very clear, that his focus, what we're using the word focus, is very important. In fact, I believe it's a huge part of his innate gift, and that's probably why he is so attracted to it, because it's a part of who he is, and he is very stern in who he is. He's very grounded in who he is. But we don't want to leave out that impact. That is the huge part of this whole thing, is that impact. And so I wanted to see, because he used the word balance earlier, that there's kind of a balance, but I felt that there is a lacking in the balance. But as we continue on to his response, you'll see that he actually doesn't believe that that's so.
The wonderful thing about balance is when we understand that it's not quality, it's not quantity, it's the quality of your balance.
Okay.
People know things about themselves, what they can indulge in and what they should not. Mm-hmm. And every person has a little more flexibility or a little less flexibility depending on their makeup. Mm-hmm. And they also understand how difficult it is to get to a certain level within themselves to accomplish what they need to accomplish. Mm-hmm. So it's the quality and the balance, because there's help that you provide, as you said, through work, because it's not just for me, it's a service that's being provided, and you're helping more people than you are yourself, because everything that I'm doing for work is helping organizations who help people outside of my reach. Right. And then there's the day that you take to just be free to those who are closer to you. This is what I do on a Sunday in general. Mm-hmm. So that balance for me centers around what I have to do this work versus allowing myself to move away from it to do something else that might be beneficial, But this part that I have to do for the 5 days of the week, it's the stuff that requires me to be in this place, and I can't drop below that because it takes too much to be focused and to complete those tasks. So you have to think a certain way.
Okay.
But yeah, you don't. So like where some people can do certain things and bounce back, and there's others who are just like, nope, if I go down there, this becomes a slope and I'm sliding all the way down. And then I'm starting from the bottom trying to get back.
So what he said about balance, I agree with completely. You know, it's not quantity, it's quality in terms of, for some people, whatever it is that they are balancing, it's not always 50-50, you know. It can be 60-40, it could, 80-20, whatever it is, it's whatever they are balancing, it allows them to operate and function. If it allows them to operate and function in the best way in their lives, then that is quality and that is balance. So I agree with that. But this is where the dissonance is occurring here, for me at least, where I'm recognizing it. He refers or is seeing the impact as a slippery slope. It sounds to me like he is saying that that free place, that ability to be that place where you're open and available, which allows him to make that, great impact, is something that he has to keep under lock and key, because if he goes down that route, if he goes, if he opens himself up in that way, it's hard for him to get himself back to that focused place. But if the focused place is not allowing you to make that great impact, or as much of that great impact, because you're not tapping into that openness, that freeness, that availability, then what impact are you actually making? What is the balance? I mean, in terms of being focused and efficient, getting his work done, being productive in his life, the balance that he has created is efficient for that. But in terms of making this distinct, unique, important, purposeful impact, like we discussed, like he stated, I think that there's room to grow. Why he looks at that free range, free spirited, available self as something that he has to figure out when to indulge in and when not to, or even something that needs to be limited. I don't know fully. He goes into it a little bit when he says, he needs to be focused and all in for his work. And I get that. I absolutely get that. That's a part of his gifts. So if that balance needs to be there, if that's important for the balance, I get it. But why does he feel like, I wish I pushed him more into why he feels like it needs to be limited so much to one day in the week. But based off of what we discussed, what he has shared, based off the research, I have a hypothesis. My father grew up in a rough area. Let's keep it, like I said, we'll keep it simple. Smart, light-skinned black boy had to fight to be seen, for his value to be seen, or more so for whatever value people were willing to see to be seen. He didn't get to define that as much for himself. He told me this story about how, being this smart boy, he would get picked on. Picked on is what, in the suburbs we think what picked on is, oh, they pushed my books to the ground. No. It was a whole lot worse, and I don't want to air a lot of his story out there, without him being here and discussing it. But it was a lot, and we'll keep it at that. And in order for him to be seen and recognized, he had to figure out how he would be accepted. Basketball, sports was the way that, he was able to develop a skill in that area, and then he was accepted through that. Fast forwarding, my dad had to take he had maybe around like 20 or 21 or so jobs. I forget the exact number, but he told me, before he could be doing what he's doing now, something which he has loved for, he would say, forever. Cinematography and production. But he had to take he had to do these 21 or so jobs in order to get out of where he was. Even and in order to create, to be able to build something for himself, even when, and especially though most of the people that were around him, from what he's told me, didn't see it, didn't encourage it, encouraged him to continue to take those jobs, encouraged him to do the traditional lifestyle, even though he knew he had more. He had more to create. He had more value to share. But he had to acclimate in order to build, in order to grow, in order to get to where he is. He had to focus. Now, it's clear he had that focus, that drive. But it was built. It definitely was built through the things that he went through in his life. To the point where it became his catalyst, but also his defense. And so, that's at the forefront of what he does. Because the value that he had to offer, that he has to offer, is something that he had to fight for people to see. And so it seems to me that now he's in a place where, he just doesn't want to deal with that and offer that to people who can't handle it. And honestly, that is perfectly fine. But I think that all of us, as people, or at least most individuals, we have dealt with enough crap from people to get to the hard place where we just don't like each other. We just don't like people. We don't like dealing with people. But we understand that the only way to make any kind of real and true and important impact in this world is through one another. If I have learned anything from this research so far, is that is the running thread, the thing that we are all designed to do. And it's the only real way that our value is ever really seen. So here is where I think the disconnect is, the dissonance. It's that I think he is looking at the impact as any impact. Yes, his work allows him to help people, but he is saying that when he gets too focused on it, he doesn't make as great of an impact as he could make. That's what he said. Though being focused is a part of his impact, the tunnel vision that is involved might be causing him to not really realize where he is truly needed. And I don't think he wants to yet. I mean, he's actually said that many times. I mean, he's always said that when he is called, when it is time, that he will go. But right now, he's not forthright with providing that impact. I mean, and it makes sense. I'm not here shaming this at all. I mean, with everything that he has dealt with in his life, even to building a family and being a provider, I mean, it required so much sacrifice in his life. He's built up walls and pride, and he's had to be focused. And that's a hard thing to do. All of it is hard to do. It's kind of hard that I have yet to experience in my life. But what I do know is that with that kind of hard, with those kinds of walls, it is 10 times harder to break them down and to find yourself again and to accept yourself, especially when you feel that so many haven't. What's easy is to accept the person that we have created. What's harder is to accept the person we've been designed to be. But if that is what it takes to make that distinct and purposeful and divine impact, isn't it worth it? I'm going to go ahead and end off today. I know we didn't do the statement or even step 3 or anything like that. Maybe I'll come back because we actually did go through the statement together. We actually came up with a statement. We went through everything, but I don't think we've actually discussed it. It doesn't seem complete yet. And so, and maybe I'll come back again. Well, maybe we'll go through the research again, and I'll share with you again his the completion of his research and his statement. But I think that this is a good place to end it, because I think this is what really mattered from this case study. And just so you know, I asked my father for permission to really dig in to what I uncovered through this, because obviously this was a lot to put out there, and I wanted to make sure that it was okay with him. And he said that he trusted me, and I hope that he still does after this. But what was more important, what's so important to me, is I think that this is something that a lot of people can relate to. And I hope that if you are a person that connects to who my father is, to the story that of his life, you find that you're in a similar situation, that you are a similar human being, I hope that this connects to you, that it opens your eyes to something, and to the person that you are, and the ways that you still have room to grow, and to how much potential that you have. Because I see so much potential in my father. He's always been such an incredible, wise, and important human being. And I just want other people to have the chance to feel that the impact that he has had on my life. So, thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the UV Effect podcast. I hope that you enjoyed this different way of doing it. And if you did, if you enjoyed this episode, if you got something from this, be sure to share and to like and subscribe so you don't miss another episode. Also, if you would like to be a part of the UV Effect research study and possibly have your case study shared on the podcast, make sure to go to GabrielleJordanInspires.com/research to send a submission. Thank you again for joining me, and I will see you next Thursday. See you then.